All right, welcome back, everyone. Buckle your seatbelts. This is always an exciting topic. The National Spatial Reference Frames, the underpinning of our geography and our representation of it is changing. And Brian Shaw, here again, this is the kind of thing that we need to hear more than once. So Brian has an update for us, and we're really happy to have you. So take it away, Brian. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. And can you guys see my slides and hear me all right?
We can hear you and see your slides virtually, Brian. Thank you.
We're good in the room. Thanks.
Thank you. So, yeah, my name is Brian Shaw. I'm with the National Geodetic Survey, and I'll have a whirlwind of a presentation to go over the National Spatial Reference System modernization. And with that, just a quick note, you may have heard the initial modernization was planned to roll out at the end of this year due to a number of factors, operationally, our workforce retention, couple furloughs and a pandemic to boot. Pushed us back a little bit in collecting data for the geopotential datum. We've gotten quite a lot of questions. The state plane coordinate system zones are expected to be finalized the end of this year, but the whole system will not be rolled out until the whole NSRS is modernized. But the zones and the parameters will be released. Vendors can then work to incorporate them into their software and stuff. But again, it will not be fully rolled out until the whole system is modernized. And for those doing GPS on benchmarks, that deadline was extended to the end of this calendar year. It had formerly been the end of last year. And I've got a couple URLs in the bottom that have more information on the delayed release and the frequently asked questions about those datums. And so I'd like to highlight the importance of coordination. NSGIC's a great community for coordination, and I wanted to make sure you all are aware of your regional advisors. So we have 14 advisors that cover all of the states and territories of the United States. My region is the Rocky Mountain region, so I have Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado are my 3 states. But we do have all 14 advisors available, and we do work to work with coordinators in the states themselves to help feed information up to us advisors that contact in the state to let us know who they are. So if you see your state's gray here and you know someone that would be a good person for the geodetic coordinator for that state, please do reach out to your advisor and let them know, because we could always use more coordinators to help feed information up to us rather than relying on us to work with all of the state surveying organizations, GIS organizations, and more. I also wanted to highlight some resources that we put out there. So we have a monthly webinar series where we try to cover different programs, just informational updates. And so we do those almost every month, not quite every month. I will highlight last October, I did a webinar on NGS geospatial resources. So that's recorded and available. The slides are made available, as well as the webinars are recorded, so you can go back and watch them in the past. And I think they go all the way back to 2014 or 15. We do have a number of educational videos as well that we put together on geodesy, what are datums, vertical reference system, or vertical datums as well. There's also some online training resources that you can go there, online lessons. I think there's 5 current lessons. We also have an NGS training center, which during normal times we have in-person training, but they've also been putting together online training. So you can go to the training center website there. We've recorded a number of presentations at geospatial summits in 2021 and 2019. That's really where our senior scientists go into depth about NSRS modernization, so you can check those out. And then all presentations like this one, we upload to the presentation library. And so if you see any slides you like in this presentation or presentations from NGS in general, you can go to the presentation library, grab the slides and use them. I also wanted to mention recent publications. So we have 3 blueprint documents that really are an outline to the modernization of the National Spatial Reference System. So these blueprint documents were put out in 2017 or 18 originally. We updated them in 2020 and got them updated and published in 2021. So you can go and check these blueprint documents out, as well as Dr. Michael Dennis put together a great report on the history, policy, and future directions of the state plane coordinate system. So in that document, he's got all of the parameters of the state plane coordinate system, projections, and a whole bunch of background information about that. Just a quick history of NOAA and NGS. We were our nation's first science agency. And so Thomas Jefferson created the Survey of the Coast in 1807. And so back then, our primary commerce was through shipping. And so it was very important to make sure that all of the ships were getting into port safely as well as getting out of port safely. So we needed to know where any offshore obstructions were, as well as to know where those offshore obstructions are. You really need to know where the land is onshore. And so that's really why geodesy is a very important aspect, is that it's positioning and letting us know where things are, and then relating those offshore obstructions to where the known positions are. And so we'd hired Ferdinand Hassler as the first superintendent. And so he did his first surveys up in New York Harbor. I'll have a map of that in a second. But then in 1836, the name was changed to the U.S. Coast Survey. 1878 to the U.S. Coast and Survey, or U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey, which is what the name was for, almost a century. All of the marks you see in the ground, a vast majority of them will actually say USC and GS. So the marks in the ground are a big aspect of what NGS has done through the past. But then in 1970, the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey got merged with a bunch of other offices like the Weather Service and the Fisheries, and NOAA was established. And so our mission at the National Geodetic Survey is to define, maintain, and provide access to the National Spatial Reference System. And so this National Spatial Reference System is essential for having consistent coordinate systems. So making sure that federal agencies and state agencies have this consistent coordinate system to use, so we're not all creating our own datums and coordinate systems, and then you're trying to merge that data together, and then things aren't overlaying. So all of us GIS people understand, when you get data from different places and the maps just don't line up, either the road center lines aren't plotted on the imagery or things like that. That's often due to using different coordinate systems. And so you need to make sure that we're all in this consistent coordinate system that's called the National Spatial Reference System. And that's what we're working to modernize. And so the importance of geodesy, I highlighted Hassler's first work here on the left in New York Harbor, but you can see that it's progressed. This middle map here is the triangulation network in the geodetic control diagram, and this map was created in 1969. It's still the same exact area. It's harder to see because there's a lot more control in this area and a lot more angles turned. But we've moved away from the old method of turning angles with theodolites, which are used in these first two maps, to the one on the right of using GNSS, and so Global Navigation Satellite System. So we have these GPS surveys and continuous GPS constantly collecting data. And so all of those angles turned where you had to physically set up an instrument and turn angles is now just done with continuous data, or going out with a GNSS receiver and collecting new data. And so this image on the right there is a snapshot of the National Adjustment of 2011, which created NAT 83 2011. Our sister office, the Office Coastal Survey, also still puts out the bathymetric maps and nautical charts. And so our job is very challenging at NGS because we're trying to model this infinitely complex Earth into models that make it easier for our computers to do processing, and that's continued to evolve. Today we've got supercomputers in the cloud that constantly do stuff for us, but in the past, we had these simple Garmins or GNSS receivers that really had limited space to store this information or to store the programs needed for it. And so we needed to create these simplified models of the Earth, from modeling it as a sphere to as our science progressed and we understood the shape of the Earth, it's actually an oblate ellipsoid, so it's pinched at the poles and the equator expands out. to the geoid model, which is a basic representation of sea level. For this model here, EGM 2008, is put out by NGA. And so our understanding of the Earth has continued to evolve, and we've needed to create these models to help us to be able to model it and create a better representation and better estimates of what's occurring. And so datums and reference frames have been a tricky topic. It took me many years to really understand what it is and get a good model in my head of what is a datum and a reference frame, and how do I, understand that. And so the former director of NGS, Dave Zolkowski, I was talking to him about how he envisions it, and he just gave me this explanation of a datum or reference frame is a reference surface or framework to reference your data to for consistency. And as we discussed this and talked more, it really made me think about when I was a kid and getting my height measured, every year as I was growing up. That reference surface that I was being referenced to was the carpet that my parents would stand me up against the wall every year, and I'd be measured against that reference surface to get my height. And so after a number of years, my parents decided to take out the carpet and put in hardwood floors. And in essence, they changed that reference surface. So it's no longer my marks on the wall were referenced to the carpeted surface, and now that surface changed to hardwood. And that is the essence of what we're doing with NSRS modernization. We're not moving things up and down or left and right. We're just changing those reference surfaces or reference frames to which things were referenced. And so a big way we're going to do that is through measuring gravity and getting more gravity collected. And our understanding of gravity has evolved since the times of Aristotle, where he was, measuring objects falling proportional to their mass, to Galileo with terminal velocity, the Tower of Pisa, to Einstein's theory of general relativity, which he put out, over 100 years ago, but it wasn't proved. It wasn't proven correct until 100 years later. So about 8 or 9 years ago, a group measured gravity waves and proved Einstein's theory correct. And so we're going out and collecting aerial gravity throughout all of the states and territories. We've been doing this since 2008, when I actually had the pleasure to fly on the first gravity survey mission out of Montgomery, Alabama. And so we've continued to collect these blocks, filling in this patchwork. And today I'm happy to say we're right at 92% complete. We've still got 8% to complete, and some of that's the more tough areas like the Aleutians, Guam and the Northern Marianas, Hawaii and American Samoa. I believe we're going to get all of the Pacific collected this spring and summer. That's the plan. We've been working to get those done and had a couple setbacks over the last couple years, but we're working to fill this out, and we should have 100% complete coverage in the next 2 or 3 years. And so this will be fundamental to putting out that geopotential datum that will replace NAVD88. And so why are we modernizing the National Spatial Reference System? Really, it comes down to the current models were built on old technology. We collected data over the last 200 years. Theodolites, where you'd have a measurement. Actually, this instrument right here is an old theodolite, where you would turn angles and get positions. And so all of the data that went into developing NAD83 and NAVD88 was old data, and then GPS came on the scene right around the time that these were coming out and really blew things away, because you could collect GPS data so much faster than going out and building these Bilby towers and turning angles. And so that combined with the notion that the NAD83, when they positioned that ellipsoid, they did it with the best data available, but today we understand that the center of the Earth for that ellipsoid was actually 2.2 meters off. And so we're going to get that correct, get it equal to what the international community with ITRF 2014 at the moment has, as well as NAVD88 currently relies on marks in the ground. And so many marks in the ground haven't been surveyed since the 30s and 40s. And those elevations are still the official elevations, where if someone wants to go get a new elevation on a mark, they've got to go survey to a mark that has a current NAVD88 elevation and apply that height over with the survey. And so It's not very efficient. Leveling is extremely costly, and so making these new models that can utilize GNSS more effectively will help us to meet the technology needs of today for a higher accuracy and quicker collection. And so there's many benefits to modernizing the NSRS. It'll be fast, accurate, consistent elevations everywhere, no longer relying on heights that were collected in in the 1930s and 40s or maybe even earlier than that, as well as improving public safety and with floodplain maps and emergency route planning with better models of where water will flow, as well as the accurate positioning needs that will be needed for autonomous vehicles, building infrastructure models in smart cities. We're getting to the point where we really need these centimeters. It's no longer a meter is okay or half a meter. We're getting down to where we really need those centimeters. And so the best way to determine coordinates in the modernized NSRS will be to go out and resurvey. We understand the Earth is constantly moving and reshaping, from crustal motion, moving things horizontally, to ground fluid withdrawal, changing heights, to uplift due to glacial isostatic adjustment. And so going out and resurveying is the best thing you can do today. And through the use of GNSS and that quick collection, it'll be more available. And so, but in the future, if you can't go out and resurvey all that data, just readjusting it into the future reference frames and geopotential data will help to provide a better coordinate than just transforming it, which again, there's going to be times where you don't have that original data to readjust it. So transforming the coordinates will be the only way. There's terms of survey grade versus mapping grade, and what is that really? And so a transformation will be at different levels depending on the data available. And so I'll talk a little bit more about GPS on benchmarks in a minute for helping to build the transformation tool for NAVD88 to NAPDD 2022. And so what can you do to prepare for NSRS modernization? Metadata is going to be essential. Understanding what data you have, what datum it's in, if you use GNSS to collect it, what geoid model was used to get those elevations, those NAVD88 heights. So making sure that your data, the data about your data is reliable, it will be essential. If you don't have that metadata and you don't know what it is, then really you're just going to be really unsure of what you have, and that just creates a lot of uncertainty in the values. And so trying to get all of your data into the current realization of NAD83 2011, as well as into NAVD88, will help you to have a better avenue into the modernized NSRS. I've got a quick little video just to talk about the history of the data collected. If you see this network here, all of these triangles you're seeing here, people set up these bilby towers or got on tops of buildings or on tops of mountains and turned angles to get the data we have that created NAD83. This was a monumental effort of surveyors going across the nation, constantly surveying. We had, probably hundreds of surveyors in the past that would go out and collect this data. We do not have the budget to be able to go out and collect that data, as well as the leveling data that you can see here. The red lines here are surveyors walked all of these kilometers, surveying with 2 rods and an instrument between the 2 rods to measure elevation changes. The Works Progress Act really helped to fund this, where we could hire unemployed engineers to densify this network. And it was just an amazing feat to be able to get this amount of leveling data together for us to build NAVD88. But we don't have the funds to go out and survey everything as we used to. And so we've got to create a system and modernize things. And so with that, we also understand that the Earth is moving. And so each plate is moving in different ways. And so that's really the essential reason for creating 4 terrestrial reference frames, one for each plate where there are states or territories on the plates. And so we have the North American terrestrial reference frame for the North American plate for CONUS in Alaska. We've got the Caribbean terrestrial reference frame for Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. We've got the Pacific terrestrial reference frame for Hawaii and American Samoa, as well as the Mariana terrestrial reference frame for Guam and the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas. And so each of these plates is moving in a different way. So we've created these terrestrial reference frames to help us to model each plate differently and being able to apply parameters to the coordinates on them. We're also putting out the North American Pacific Geopotential Datum of 2022. Just a little mouthful there. It's not just the vertical datum, it's more than just heights. There's a number of models that are feeding into this. There's a geopotential model that will help to model where water is going to flow, a deflection of the vertical that helps us to do a number of parameters for different things. Gravity model to understand where gravity is and where the mass is going to pull water, and the geoid model that will be used to collect GNSS data and get heights in that GD 2022. There'll be one huge model that covers roughly a quarter of the Earth's surface. You can see that here, and then there'll be two smaller ones to cover Guam and the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas, as well as the American Samoa. Everyone likes a good catchphrase. You know, Talladega Nights had shake and bake. Well, NGS has shift and drift. And so shift and drift will be how we will be getting into the new system and how we will continue to be into the new system. It's not fast and furious shift and drift. It's shift and drift where it'll be the sudden shift when the NSRS is modernized. There will be these datum shifts. And so you will transform your data or you will resurvey your data and things will shift. And so there'll be a rough horizontal change of a half a meter to 4 meters in some places, again, depending on the plates you're on. Ellipsoid height changes are plus or minus 2 meters, and an elevation change of a half a meter, a negative half a meter to a positive 2 meter. And so this immediate shift will happen when the NSRS is modernized and released, but there will be a continuous drift of when it's modernized, tracking that drift of where the plates are moving, where heights are changing, and so there'll be that continuous drift. And so the two components of the drift will be the tectonic plate rotation, as well as all other residual motion, you know, from ground fluid withdrawal to the glacial isostatic adjustment in the Great Lakes. And so here's a couple maps just showing some of these shifts that will be happening. The horizontal shifts on the globe image on the left, and then the vertical height changes of the shift on the right. And so you can see, you know, not much will change down in Florida, but there'll be some significant changes up in Seattle and in Washington State. And a lot of this is due to a tilt and bias due to the leveling data. And so there's systematic errors in every measurement taken. And so the systematic errors is adjusting all of that data across the country just continue to build up towards the northwest, where heights are actually different than what the sea level heights actually are with NAVD 88. And that's another main reason why we need to modernize the system. The plates are moving, and so the drift of these plates and the horizontal velocities, you can see that each of these plates are moving different. You can see the North American plate here for CONUS. You can see the Pacific plate, you know, for Southern California and going up to San Francisco along the coast. And you can see the change in Caribbean. I mean, the Caribbean's going to the northeast. The North American plate's doing this kind of counterclockwise rotation, and then the Pacific plate is shooting up very quickly to the northwest. And so not all plates are moving the same exact way. And in these crunch zones where the plates come together, things are also changing in different ways. This plate that's off the coast of Oregon and Washington, the Juan de Fuca plate, is subducting underneath the North American plate, which causes things to change a little bit along the coastline, as well as increases the risk for earthquakes. And so one of the main ways we're modeling things is through these continuously operating reference stations. And so we have a NOAA CORS network that is basically a collaborative network where many state DOTs, other organizations like UNAVCO share their data with us. We put it into this NOAA CORS network, and we use that data to model and see where things are moving and how they're moving. And so we've got, you know, most of the sites that in this cooperative network are in the U.S. states and territories, but we do also have sites around the world. in different places where we've worked with users. And on the right here is a couple examples of these core stations. One of them up in Breckenridge, Colorado, and another one in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. And so they're not all made the same. Some of them are on buildings, some of them are pillars like this. And so vertical motion plays a major role in understanding how things are moving, and subsidence caused the ground fluid withdrawal and sedimentation. There's parts of the San Joaquin Valley that have subsided, tens of meters since the 1920s. There's also glacial isostatic adjustment occurring in the Great Lakes, centered around the southern end of Hudson Bay, where the glaciers compacted the crust so much when the glaciers were there that the crust is still rebounding. And there's actually parts that are rebounding, and then the edges of where the glaciers were are subducting because of that mass movement. And so being able to model this and understand how things are moving is done primarily through the cores, but also through resurveying. And then there's instant geophysical phenomena like earthquakes and calderas and earth tides that are causing changes very quickly or seasonally. And so the map on the left here is showing you this glacial isostatic adjustment where the Hudson Bay is uplifting at about 8 to 13 millimeters a year. The San Joaquin Valley is just, the image on the right you can see from 1925 to 1977, 8.5 meters of change over 50 years, which according to the study that USGS had here, with San Joaquin Valley subsiding 20 to 24 inches in 16 months. That's just a crazy amount of vertical change. Again, if the marks that were in that area haven't been observed for 20 years, the heights are not good anymore. We cannot have users using those heights because of such rapid changes. I mean, 2 feet in 16 months in some places, just crazy. And speaking of crazy, there's crazy amounts of motion that happen with earthquakes. The China Lake earthquake in California that happened a few years ago caused 6 to 10 feet of horizontal change immediately. And then there's just the residual effects after that earthquake. In Puerto Rico, they had a number of earthquakes right in a row around, just a little bit after the China Lake, which caused 16 centimeters of vertical change down on the south end of Puerto Rico. And so these instant changes need to be modeled. Understanding where things are moving after such earthquake events also need to be modeled, and that creating these new models and datums and reference frames for the modernized system will help us to be able to adapt to these changes and help other science agencies be able to model them and apply them into their requirements. For the transformation tool and just modernizing the NSRS, we put out this GPS on benchmarks web map and application. I'm getting short on time, so I don't want to keep people from lunch. You can check this out on our website. We've also put together a number of other dashboards for Opus Shared Solutions, which is how a number of users are submitting that data to us. And so you can see just the effort in this down here in 2021 is almost doubled what was submitted in 2020, and we expect that to continue to progress. Going out, even if you don't have a GNSS receiver, you can go out and submit mark recoveries. Let us know that those marks are there. If you're going for a hike on a mountain and you see a mark, you can take your smartphone and check the map to see if that's one of our marks. And if it is, you can just let us know that it's there, that it's in good condition, and that'll help the surveyors in your local community. We put together this mark recovery dashboard that tracks those recoveries. The state plane coordinate system, quite a number of states have chosen to submit LDPs. This map you can see here shows you all of the number of zones that were submitted for each state. And so each state will have a statewide zone. Some states chose to have their normal zones that they had in the past, SPCS 83, and then quite a few states chose to add LDPs to the state plane coordinate system. Also highlight the beta NGS map. We put all that data on there. The geospatial resources, Opus projects 5.0. And I got to the end because I see Frank's video on.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Thanks very much. That is the kind of thing I need to hear over and over again. And I love shift and drift. That's something that's going to stick with me. So let's continue this conversation in the member clicks executive director circle. Go ahead and fire off your questions, and we'll keep this conversation going in between our meetings. But really happy to have you, Brian. Always wonderful to get back to the roots of our geography. So thanks very much.